There he is.
How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Ara, what's going on?
Oh, it's Carolina summertime heat. I mean, it's hot down here.
Yeah. I just was upstate this past weekend. It was March weather, and it was warmer here. Next weekend, it's going to be warmer there and cooler here. Go figure.
Hey, thanks for promoting NASA, man.
Oh, hey. My uncle worked on the Apollo 12 lunar module.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, his name is on a plaque on the moon, my uncle.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I wish I could go to the moon. I said once a few weeks back, I said, when they send the next moon landing with actual people on it again, they should put a life-size doll of Alice Cramden and lay her there.
To the moon, Alice.
Here is Mitchell Cohen. You'll have till 50.
Mitchell, don't you love it that people have stories, and if we would just take the time to listen, we'd be entertained by each other's experiences?
I definitely believe that. Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you too. My God, you know when I first heard about your book, Looking for the Magic, this really affects me in the way that I was that jock on the radio when Arista came into being, and it's like,
oh wow.
So I mean,
in what market?
Oh my! I was at Billings, Montana, market number 257. How about that?
How about that? I'm gonna have to ask my friends in Arista Promotion if they remember.
Oh my God! Because I mean, one of the things that I always loved about and respected Arista for was I believe that they helped usher in the adult contemporary movement of the 1980s going into the 90s. Because with people like the Thompson Twins, Haircut 100, Air Supply, there was a movement taking place, and Arista's name was all over it.
Yeah, that was a hot moment for us. That was a lot of fun. Obviously, we began, in that area, what you'd call like hot AC, I guess, in the 70s with artists like Barry Manilow, Melissa Manchester, and artists like that. And in the early 80s, that became a boom. And of course, once Whitney came along,
yes,
everything just exploded.
And was that the connection with Clive Davis? Is that why Whitney landed there?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, one of his A&R people brought him to see a showcase at Sweetwater's uptown in Manhattan. He was transfixed by her from the start, as everyone was who saw her at that period. And it took a long time to build that first album. To construct something that reflected all the different facets of her personality, and then of course it became a blockbuster. It became a record that just went through the roof.
Yeah, I remember when Whitney first appeared on the music scene, because I mean the record reps that would come to the radio station, we'd all sit in groups and listen to those songs. I miss that when those reps would show up and we would just talk.
Oh, is that not a thing anymore? Is that not a part of the game?
I'm sure that one I love me some iHeartRadio, but that's you kind of step free of that if that's not your department. They have bigger names in bigger cities that make those decisions for you.
Oh, I get it.
Now, to put this book together, because I mean the coolest thing about Looking for the Magic is the fact that you take us behind the scenes. You actually unveil the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Yeah. I mean, it was important. I started at Arista in 1977 as a copywriter. So, I lived through most of this era. And to your point, a lot of what people think of as Arista Records stretches from Barry Manilow to Whitney Houston. I mean, that's pretty much, the twin peaks of Arista. And I wanted to fill in some of the gaps. I mean, I wanted to talk about Gil Scott-Heron and Patti Smith and the Kinks, and and go into like how eclectic, how diverse the artist roster was, and how exciting it was to be a part of the music business and that label in particular during that era. I mean, it's not a memoir. I'm not a character in the book, but it's stuff that I was a part of and that I wanted to share.
You bring up Patti Smith, and the one thing that I truly remember is how a song on the radio becomes a poster on the wall, and Arista was part of that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing about Patti that and Gil and Lou Reed, is that they really had an intensity, a drive, a purpose to them, whether or not they were ever going to have hit records,
Mm-hmm.
In the conventional sense, was less important than the statements that they were making. And if you got some hits along the way that became posters on the wall, that was just, just an added thing, an added bonus. And yeah, and it was really, really exciting to be a part of all that, to be at the bottom line, like a few times a month, to see artists up like that up close, to see Lou Reed and Patty at the bottom line, or Gil Scott-Heron, or yeah, it was just I was in my 20s. It was my first music industry job, and I just felt I landed in the most hip place to be, and it was fulfillment of all my dreams when I was a kid and listening to the hits on the radio.
So were you geeky like me in the way that when you knew that you were in some place special, you had to get pictures, you had to get something to mark that you were once part of that? Because I've done that in radio where it's like, man, this is never going to happen again. This much talent in one building.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to write. I mean, that's why I became a writer to begin with, like in the early 70s when I started to write for the rock magazines, for Cream and High Fidelity and Fusion and Phonograph Record, because I wanted to share my excitement.
Yep.
I mean, I wanted, if an album, if I bought an album and it excited me, or if I went to a show, I wanted to be able to call someone at the magazine and say, "Oh, I want to write about this. I want to, I want to share what I have to say about Elvis Costello's first album," or because that's our mission. Our mission is to find things and share them. I mean, that's what your mission is too. To hear something or see someone that you go like that the next time they come to town, you want to bring everybody and say, you got to see this, because this is the last time you'll be able to see this band in a club, because this is going to break wide open. And when you're right about that, about an artist or a song, or and it's like a validation, and it's like, and the excitement of spreading the word about it is why we all end up here. I mean, it's why you ended up where you are. As a music fan, I mean, we find the ways to express our music fandom. Even if we can't play an instrument, or we can't write a song, or we don't have a good singing voice,
right,
there are other ways. There are other ways to tell people, this is worth paying attention to.
Well, Arista affected radio, and the reason why is because I started in AM radio. We were struggling. We were trying to keep ourselves alive because this new monster called FM was starting to dominate over us in the Nielsen ratings and things like that. And we needed someone like the Kinks. I'll never forget my program director saying, "I can't believe that the Kinks have got new music." And so all of a sudden, the older generation of jocks are talking with the new generation, the new age, and all of a sudden you have a band like the Kinks that are connecting us.
Yeah, it was fun. I was really, I was still, just a rock writer when Arista, made its first album with the Kinks, and I was like, God, I was such a Kinks fan, and then those last few albums on RCA, kind of let me down a little bit, and I'm like, why did Arista sign the Kinks? They're not really connecting with me, and then I got to the label, and they made their album Misfits, and then Low Budget, and it's like, and then I'd be seeing the Kinks headlining at Madison Square Garden. It was like, it was amazing how that happened. That they'd gone from being, one of the most important bands of the British Invasion, and then having that whole creative and commercial slump, to being a huge, like, arena band in America. It was so much fun to watch, because they were one of my favorite bands of all time, for one thing. And to see that happen up close, I mean, that's just tremendously exciting.
One of the things I wish I could have been was a fly in the wall in the marketing department, because as a 45 buyer, I purchased the singles in music stores, and then even in the studio when I was going through the music bins at the radio station, Arista's label always stood out. I always knew where to go. So I would love to know the marketing behind the label and how we always, once we saw those colors, boom, we knew that it was an Arista record.
Yeah, well, that's about Clive. I mean, it's about Clive Davis. He was notoriously, a hands-on record executive. He made sure that everything went past his desk. Every piece of artwork, every ad. Believe me, I know. I wrote the ads for quite a long time. That it had to maintain what a certain level of quality, in his mind, and a certain vision for how things were going to be presented. And what I show in the book are some of the examples of the ads that we took out, and how vivid they were, and how striking they were, and how they used, information and reviewer quotes. And I wanted the reader to get a sense of what the label looked like. It's sort of like, so I got a lot of old ads from Billboard and Rolling Stone, and put them in the book so people could be like, oh, here's how we promoted this.
Yeah.
Here's the way in which we presented it to the world. Whether it was like the first albums, but any of them, the Kings or Gil or Patty.
Wow, here's a page from the Radio Bible that millennials and Generation Zers will never understand. We relied on R&R to get us connected to Arista's artists.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I used to write those ads.
Oh my God.
I did for quite a long time. That was like my job before I had the A&R job. And so it was about conveying our excitement and trying to say, like, this is happening and you should be a part of it. I mean, first of all, I have no idea how promotion people wake up every day and do their job. It seemed to me to be so exhausting and frustrating to like hammer people for airplay and increases in rotation. And, I got to get this ad or I'm not going to be able to walk into the next meeting with Clive. He's going to want to know why. It's, to me, that's a skill that I cannot fathom. But beyond that, I had to convey that, look, this single is getting this response in this market, or this record is helping album sales here, or MTV Play really made this record take off in Des Moines, or it's like it's a matter of gathering up the information and presenting it in a way that makes people feel like if they're not in on it, they're out of it.
Wouldn't you say that Arista was part of the new British invasion? Because it really seemed like we were so perfectly ripe with MTV, with FM and AM working together in promoting bands and stuff like that. We went right into a British invasion and loved it.
Yeah, that was as a lot of people have pointed out, when MTV first started, a lot of American record labels were not making artist videos. I mean, labels were not in the video business, whereas in England, there already were. So a lot of the programming in MTV very early on was by the British bands. And so to a large extent, A Flock of Seagulls and Haircut 100 and the Thompson Twins and and other artists on other labels like Duran Duran and Human League and Culture Club. Yeah, it was an explosion for sure, and we had a lot of that. We had the Thompson Twins and Haircut, and through other arrangements, we got like A Flock of Seagulls and stuff like that. Yeah, we were definitely in the mix in that area.
I got to give you an inside thing that happened in Billings, and just how quirky Montanans are, is that with A Flock of Seagulls, they wouldn't let us say, I ran so far away, because it would remind people of the country of Iran. And I went, you've got to be kidding me.
I interviewed one of our artist development people for the book, And he said he brought up that thing that there was resistance to people playing a song called "I Ran"
That's it
on the radio, so that we had to put in parentheses "so far
That's
away."
it.
It's like so that the people like you would be able to say like "I ran so far away" by the flock of seagulls rather than that's yeah. He brought that up, and I'm like, and I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that it was that parenthetical title was because people thought, oh yeah, people don't want to hear about Iran.
That's
It's
it.
like it's just so bizarre to me.
Would you say that Arista was an indie label, or I mean, because I mean, it had to start somewhere. It didn't start off brilliant in the beginning, but yet it grew into something unforgettable.
It was an indie label during the period that I write about.
Okay.
It was independently distributed. You know how that works. I mean, there was like in each market, there's a distributor. It's not a branch system like the majors. I know this is a little bit in the weeds, but that's how it's defined. And so from like 1974 when it started until the mid 80s, it was an independent label, and then it became part of the whole RCA system.
See,
in the 80s.
I will never forget being at the Yellowstone County Fair in Montana when we played Haircut 100 for the first time on Cook Radio. We were at the fair, live crowd, and they just went frickin' berserk. And it was like a Beatles moment for me because people were dancing to it.
I loved that band. I went to see them here in New York at the Ritz, and that band only had one album out, and I think they were on the brink of being one of the most important bands of that movement. I mean, it was like that in a lot of markets. It's certainly in LA, in other places, that Haircut had like a little like a real a real excitement around them.
Mm-hmm.
And but then right before they were going to make a second album, they split up, and their lead singer went solo, and there was a ton of potential there. I think that's one of the that's one of the things that should have happened that didn't quite.
Does it shock you that a lot of these Arista musicians are still going at it today? They're making it privately in their homes and stuff, but they're still at it.
Some are, and it's always nice to hear from them, and I tracked some of them down, for the book, and David Foreman and Willie Nile. It's great. It's great to to connect with them and remind them or ask them about their time with us, and know that they're still out there, that they're still making music. And I just that's fun. I mean, it's like it shows that that we were right about about their talent and their potential for longevity, even if it wasn't the precise right commercial moment for them, because of any number of factors. We didn't have the right single, or something else from a competing label was a little too similar. I mean, there's so many factors that go into whether something connects or not, and to a large extent the music industry is very capricious and arbitrary. But but in the end, if you're as talented as Willie Nile, you can make a life, making music, and that's something that should give everyone a little optimism.
Well, you definitely give us the opportunity to step inside the music business, which leads me to the next question in the way of how easy was it to convince Bruce Springsteen to give up Because the Night?
Well, I had to ask a lot of questions about that. It happened in the studio.
Really?
Patty was working with Jimmy Iovine, who was also working with Bruce. They were all in the same studio. Springsteen at the time was writing a lot of songs for the album he was working on, and some of them he decided, oh, this is not gonna make my record. So Jimmy Iovine and asked Bruce, I guess, if he could play it for if he could bring it down the hall to Patty to for the other album he was working on. He got Patty a cassette, and she was from what I hear a little hesitant to do a Springsteen song.
Yep.
But heard something in it that she knew that she could make it her own and rewrite the lyrics and play with the hook a bit. And it very much became a collaboration, even though they didn't physically work together, in the studio at the same moment. It became a Patty song through Springsteen, and it's still, a song that they do every night, and they're proud to do it. And it was one of those, hit records that, I remember I was in the audience the first time she ever played it live. It hadn't been out yet. It was part of her show, and Springsteen came out and sang it with her.
What?
That was the first time any of us had heard that song, and we went back to Arista, the next day or whenever it was, and said, like, we think Patty has a hit. I mean, there's like this song that she's doing in her act, and Springsteen's a part of it, and we only heard that once, but man, it stuck with us, and thank goodness it was what we thought it was. It was the record that got her on pop radio for the first time, and it was one of those odd moments that you go, that you always remember, that you're sort of like, oh, I was there the night that she premiered, because the night, and then we got to tell everybody at Arista that this existed, and it's going to be great.
Damn. Mitchell, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, man, thanks.
No, thank you for this book. You be brilliant today, okay?
I'm going to do my best. You too.